The Democratic Republic of Congo cited efforts to reform its forest code to ensure fair sharing of REDD benefits as well as its challenges within the region.
If we compare to the capacity of absorption of our forests, because you can have funding according to the capacity of absorption of your own forest. So we don't even get 0.1% of the capacity of absorption of our forests for this issue. So we need to get more. We are not begging for money, but if the rest of the world ask DRC to have a real protected policy for its environment, you need to also give the funding in order to help him to really have a long-term development policy, because it's a question of giving everybody access to resources and good living, and this kind of stuff need funding.
The DRC, an emerging actor in the reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation project, has been criticized because its REDD Plus projects are not supported by a legally binding framework, leaving forest communities in a legal void and vulnerable to economic exploitation.
You ask us to protect the climate and to protect the environment, but what will our people live of? They need their livelihoods and they need to eat.
The United States, Australia and Canada were not spared because of the part they are playing in ensuring that the global pace being taken in the fight against climate change is not fast enough. Some legislators, especially those from Europe, accuse the United States of politicizing the issue of climate change, using its internal governance problem to make it very difficult for the world to operate.
The Australian and the Canadian government are behaving disgracefully, both of them, refusing to accept the science, actually going back on what should be done. And I think this is a very, very considerable damage. They are both rich countries that ought to be playing their part. They've both grown rich because of pollution, and both of them are failing to meet their obligations internationally and refusing to accept the science. I think that's a scandal, and it's a very serious international scandal. It's not a frustration, it actually creates anger. I said recently, I don't think I've ever come across a government as ignorant as the Australian government when it comes to dealing with climate change. I think this is a really serious issue. And it's an issue which other countries should be very angry about, because when countries like Mongolia and Bangladesh, with very much less resources, are fighting the battle, if they then look across at countries that are perfectly able to do it, then I can understand why they would be very angry. On the other hand, you do have to say that if you take Canada, British Columbia is an absolute star in what it is doing. And the same is true down the whole of the west coast of the United States. And my second frustration is with the United States, where the internal problems of governance, which are your own business, but they are making it very difficult for the world to operate and for you to operate in the world.
I think Gina McCarthy and Lisa Jackson before her are true unsung heroes of public health, of economic competitiveness, and of climate change. You know, it's not an easy political environment in the United States, and that's a whole different question. But they've put forward really smart, regulation, which and the analysis shows that those states who already moved to curb emissions, and those states that have already been thinking about their competitiveness going forward, are in a much better position to be able to meet these goals and targets and to succeed than those who aren't. And so, I think after President Obama announced about a year ago that this ambitious climate plan, to come in then just 10 or 11 months later with the first draft, that's what good civil servants do. And I think, everybody who criticises should walk for a day in their shoes, right? So hats off to them. Now it goes through, what I'm sure will be a painful process of review and then legal struggles and whatever. So it will be to the next president that we will have to look for implementation. But, I think what's interesting is that we are actually discussing this now, or that the United States is discussing this now, that there is action in Washington, that there is leadership, that that John Podesta as an advisor in the White House is driving each department of government, as I understand it, to really think about what their contribution is, and that you have a productive dialogue, I understand, between the United States and China, or that both China and the United States feel that they have a productive dialogue. We called for a G2, a couple of years ago, and we're just really pleased that this is starting to get the level of attention that it should get.
At the end of the meeting, the legislators' resolution calls on national legislators and parliament to intervene decisively in the international process by pushing for more ambitious domestic action on climate change and formally reviewing current emission reduction pledges to ensure they are in line with the scale of action required to avoid dangerous levels of climate change. Recognizing that tackling poverty and unsustainable use of natural resources are the biggest challenges facing humanity in the 21st century, the legislators committed to undertake a comprehensive assessment of existing national legislative responses to address and prepare for the impact of climate change to ensure they are consistent with the international goal of limiting global average temperature rise to 2 degrees Celsius.
I don't believe the next agreement, which will probably be called the Paris Protocol or something, because it won't be Kyoto, and it will have the principles in it, but it will have great difficulty about imposing legal framework. So what I've been convincing Globe about, and which we've now put in a resolution here, that a combination of global agreement and using domestic legislation is the way forward. We have done that in Britain with the Climate Change Act. The Aussies have done the same under Labour governments, that if you want to change it, you have to bring in new legislation. You simply can't just come in and say, I'm not going to do it, as the Prime Minister found in Australia. So what we need is, first of all, the principles that are carbon level, and as we hear, and we're getting very much to that ceiling now, you still have to have a global understanding of that agreement. And I think we saw that in Doha, when all countries agreed to set a certain level of carbons that they would accept. The trouble with the Kyoto one, there was no force to enforce it if you didn't observe it. That was always the great difficulty that we put in.
Well, it's very important for the legislators now, because we need to get into place the legislation, the system by which we will implement a world agreement in Paris. And this is the moment to do it. And it's here that we can learn from other people and make sure we don't make the same mistakes that they have made, and pass on our successes too, so that we can learn from them.
That's our program for this week. Thank you for joining us. If you miss any part of the program, you can go on our website, channelstv.com/healthfile or youtube.com/channelsweb. From all of us here, it's bye for now.